I'm joined on the Crispin Flintoff show by Kevin Rowland. Wow, how you doing, Kevin?
Very good, Crispin. Thanks for having me, mate.
I was just saying it's an honour to be interviewing you for many different reasons, but firstly, I'll say this to start with. My sister played me searching for the young soul rebels when I was about 10, and I love the attitude of it. I love the vibe of it.
I'll only ask you once more. You only want to believe. This man is looking for someone to hold him down. It doesn't yet fully understand the meaning. Never heard about us. I don't know about random me. I knew about shorter days. I care about furniture. Some you will beg. You don't need. I talk about Heather O'Brien. I know about Lauren Stone. Shut it! You don't understand it. Shut it! That's not the way I planned it. Shut it! Shut your mouth till you know the truth.
I actually went to school and I made everyone watch Dexys at school when I was there, and they were all into Aswad, and they say, "What are you doing?" And then when you changed the image to 2YA, I was so, that video of Common Eileen, we went down to Elephant and Castle and we're outside that shop trying to
Oh.
emulate your video.
Come on, Eileen. Oh, I swear, baby, at this moment, you mean everything. You think that dress, my thoughts are the best, but you're dirty. Ah, come on, Eileen. Come on, Eileen.
My sister'd be so chuffed that I'm even talking to you. She's in Australia at the moment, so
All
I hope
right.
she can see this. But I just thought I'd say that first. Her name's Anna. If you want to say hello to Anna, I'm sure she'd
Hello,
like.
Anna.
Brilliant. And this book here, I've read it and I've gone over it a few times. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And I'll tell you why I think it is. It's the honesty. It's absolutely amazing how honest you are in this book. It just is so powerful to read, and I couldn't put it down. When did you learn to have that language of honesty?
In recovery. I mean, before that, I was just all front, all acting, really, just pretending. And if you ask me anything about my childhood or that I had any insecurities, I mean, I really grew up with the idea, I'm quite sure where I picked it up, but I totally had the idea that if you showed any weakness, you're going to get hurt. You had to just put on this front. And that's what I did, but it was exhausting. It was impossible. And you know, when I got into recovery, it was a trip to begin with. It didn't just happen. Oh, okay, great. I can express myself now. It's like I didn't know how to. I couldn't do it still. It was difficult. It's been a process, but yeah. And then I decided to write the book, and I didn't want to sort of edit my own life. So, I just decided to, because you can write a book, say, yeah, I was at this concert, I did this, I did that. But actually, the most important thing for me is how I was feeling about it. Do you know what I mean? I did those things. I went to those places. I wore those clothes, but it was how I was really feeling that's what I needed to express. Do you know what I mean? I just felt a need to write this book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It connected with me reading it is in a kind of spiritual way because of your honesty. It's hard sometimes for me to read books when I can tell someone's saying something for effect. and there
Yeah.
wasn't that there. So it was a direct, and you know, the sex stuff as well was some of the stuff you say in there. Just no one would ever say that anywhere, but you've written it down, and
Which
it's
sort of stuff, the teenage stuff and all that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, why not? Because this is another thing that I've discovered. Sex is one of the most powerful instincts that we have. And for example, like I talk about in the book, I mean, no one even told me about it. My parents didn't give me nothing, no sex education. The school I went to was so backward, they didn't even mention it, not even in a biology class. It just wasn't mentioned. So it didn't exist. So 13 or 14, your body is exploding with all these feelings. You're not supposed to have them. It's insane. It's kind of taboo still. So I just felt it really was important to write it because it was such a big thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's something that if my young self had read this book, it would have helped me a lot. I mean
Wow.
that's one thing that I got from that. But the other thing was your drive to do things is so inspiring. I can't get my head around your sort of delinquency, you know, the small crime that you did, the drugs, and your struggle with not being accepted as a priest, your insecurities, but then the fact that you got into playing a guitar with your brother in a kind of covers band,
Yeah.
and then within not many years, you had like a massive band of I don't know, 10 people.
It was 11 at its biggest. Yeah, 11 in the band at one point. Yeah.
And you know, writing your own lyrics, all the music, and rehearsing
A lot
and
of co-writes with the music. Some of them I wrote on my own, but a lot of them I wrote co-writes.
no, I know, but the fact that you managed to get all this together
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it was incredible, and I
Well,
can and I
it felt like life or death. Do you know what I mean? It was to prove myself that I could be something, that I wasn't hopeless like I'd been told.
yeah. The thing as well is the punk movement. I was too young to know about it, but doing a covers band and then setting up the Killjoys as a punk band, what was the what was the atmosphere like that at that point of punk? Was it everyone was being creative? Everyone seemed to want to produce music, and what was it like?
I mean, that was the best of it. What you just talked about there was the best of it. Um, the worst of it was like we encountered on our first gig. We were originally called Lucy and the Lovers, and punk had just started to happen, and it was a very small thing, but in Birmingham where I was, but they were very singular. And if you didn't fit into that thing exactly, they didn't like it. So it was like that. They'd heckle you, and that's the kind of thing. And we did eventually compromise, which was a mistake. But the best side of it was, yeah, loads of singles coming out, bands everywhere that you could go and see, dead cheap. You'd have a good night. Um, yeah, and it sort of was year zero in a way. Everything just went back to that simplistic, usually guitar, bass, and drums, and work from there. And that was inspiring in a way. Originally I was inspired by Deaf School and Roxy Music before punk, but just punk made everything accessible, and it meant you could do it. You could form a band, you could put a record out. It just made everything simpler.
The description in the book of how you were recruiting people from jazz orchestras who could play brass, a vision of this band. What made you think you could get away with something totally different from the small punk band to a big 10, 11 piece band? It's a different concept, isn't it?
Yeah, a completely different concept. I think I tried, as punk went on, we tried to change it, and I started to wear different things. Like I wore like a frilly shirt and jumpers and boxing boots, and so I might wear a sheepskin coat. And we tried to bring some 50s, 1950s influences into the music just to make it different. But people wouldn't really accept us. It's like once you've kind of laid your cards on the table, it's quite hard to get people to accept you doing something different. So, you know, the Killjoys, everything just seemed out of reach. You know, the right record company trying to get a record deal was, you know, record labels would come and see us, but you know, and they'd be interested in us, but they'd never really sign us. You know, it was everything was just out of reach. And I think I started to realize, you know, and also we weren't getting on. A lot of the band we weren't really getting on the Killjoys, and I just had this idea, even before it was looking like it was terminal with the Killjoys. I just thought, you know what, people are going to want to dance again, and I want to play soul music, but in a contemporary kind of way, in a way that relates to me. I don't want to ape American soul music, and and I just thought this band, the Killjoys, they couldn't play that kind of music. They weren't those kind of guys, you know. The guitar player, he was a good guitar player, but he was a student. You know, he was a student. He was kind of a very academic kind of guy and more into rock. He wasn't really into black music. So Kevin Archer, who had just joined the Killjoys, was into black music. He was into soul music, you know, and and I wrote a song called "Tell Me When My Light Turns Green," which ended up on the first album, Searching with the Young Soul Rebels, and I played it to Kevin Archer after a Killjoys rehearsal one day, and he went, "That's soul, that is." And I sort of burst out laughing because I knew it was soul. And and I said to him, I felt a bit bad then because I said to him, he'd only just joined this band and he packed in his apprenticeship to join. And I just said, you know, to be honest, when this band goes down, and I think it will, I'm going to form this soul band. And that was it, really. It was just an intuitive thought, you know, just an intuitive. That's, for want of a better word, artist or whatever. That's all you've got, really. You know, like an intuitive idea, a thought that comes to you, and you think, oh, that's right. You know, your job then is to follow it, try and make it happen. You know.
Back in 60, waiting to sweat at the club. Oh, Gino, for Jimmy's machine and the rock steady rub. Oh, Gino, on a night when flowers didn't suit my shoes. After a week of flunking, a back in school, the lowest head in the crowd that night. I just apologies that was keeping out of the fights. I could do with inspiration. You were my cool lover, the fighter that won. Now just look at me as I'm looking down on you. No, I'm not being flash is what I'm going to do. Chapman took the stage, his star was swinging high. Oh, Gino, this man was my mama's, my Dexys, my high. Oh, Gino, I done cried the I hail you, I chanted your name, but I never knew, like we knew, me and you were the same. I know you're all over, your song is so tame. Brrr, you fed me, you bred me, I remember your name. I can tell with inspiration, you were my cold lover, the fighter that won. Now just look at me as I'm looking down on you. No, I'm not being flash, is what I'm going to do.
Is there a way young people can create the kind of excitement around music and stuff that was there before? Have they been kind of, how can I put it, just straitjacketed by the digital age and the corporate world? Is it possible to have the same energy as like Dexys had?
I'm 72 years old. So I really don't know um, what it's like for young people now. I mean, I think some things are better for them and some things are harder for them. I mean, it's just a completely different world, you know. But I would imagine the same things apply. Like I said, with Dexys in the early days of the band, or rather in the previous band, the Killjoys, everything just seemed out of reach. We were, come on, lads, let's try. Oh, we've got to get this record company to believe in us. Oh, we're disappointed again. Didn't quite happen. You know, with the Dexys, we just made the plan and we rehearsed for 8 months. We treated it like a job. Everybody had to pack in their jobs. We all signed on the dole. In those days, you could live on the dole. I know that you can't now. But you could survive. They only called you in every 2 weeks to sign on. They didn't bother you with job clubs or any of that stuff. And you know that we saw that as our student grant, and we just rehearsed all day, just like a job, 9 to 5, 5 days a week for 8 months. And after that 8 months, we came out and we started doing gigs. And instead of chasing everybody, they came to us this time. It just changed. The whole energy had changed. So I think the same principle exists. You've got to create your own buzz. You know, that it's happened that we were in Birmingham and and they came from London, people, you know, record companies or whatever to see us, managers. But and we created that buzz, you know, because I mean, I know it sounds terrible. It might sound arrogant, but it's the truth. You know, I've heard young people or younger people or people who want to get going in a band say to me, "Oh, how do you do it? How do you do it?" And I know this might sound arrogant, but it's true. Be good. And this is never the answer they want to hear. They want to hear, "Oh, did you go to that club and meet this DJ, or did you go
Mm.
and hang out with those people and meet them?" No, just rehearsed and were good, and then you got a really good chance. It's like the Beatles, I'm not comparing ourselves to the Beatles, obviously. But I mean, you know, Hamburg made them a couple of years playing 6, 7 hours shifts every night. They said, I read a book, when they came back to Liverpool after their second Hamburg stint, they just started playing Litherland Town Hall. I remember it in the book. The audience, as soon as they started playing, the audience rushed to the front.
Wow.
They were just good. Do you know what I mean? They'd been doing so much that it was just they mastery. I'm not saying I'm a master, but I know that if I work hard, the results are a lot better than if I don't. That's all.
I don't know anything about cocaine really. Could you sort of tell us what's cocaine addiction like compared maybe with what you hear from other addictions? What would you say sets it apart?
Well, I think a lot of people watching this will probably know, you know. Um, I don't know. It's quite similar to alcohol in a way because um, this is what happens to a cocaine addict, not a non-cocaine. This is what happens to a cocaine addict. In the same way, this happens to an alcoholic. A normal person has a line of cocaine or has a drink, and they might have another one, they might not. With a cocaine addict or an alcoholic, they have one and it sets off a craving, which is virtually impossible to resist. They can't stop. It's not a question of willpower. They absolutely can't stop. And that was my experience. Didn't start off like that, but it became that. I crossed an invisible line into cocaine addiction. So that's the first symptom. When I put one in, I lose all control. It's not like, you know, you have one drink and then decide to get drunk. That's not it. It's you have to do it. You don't have a choice. Your body, you know,
Mm.
is experiencing this craving that's impossible to resist. That's one. And the other one is when you decide to stop, and I talk about it in the book, with all of your resources. And I went to two different hypnotists. I used my own willpower. You know, I swore to my daughter I will never touch that shit again. And if you put me on a lie detector at that moment, I'd have passed it because in that moment I'm telling the truth. I absolutely am telling the truth. But a week later, 2 weeks, whatever it is, I can't remember. I don't have that resolve anymore. And someone says to me, Kev, do you want one? I'm like, no. Yeah, right then. And I'm off again. So, so two things. One is the craving after the first one, and then when I tried to stop, I could stop, but I could never stay stopped. Basically, I paused. So the strongest desire to stay free from cocaine is no use whatsoever. It's you're always going to pick it up. That's cocaine addiction.
And the thing about being so successful and having lots of attention and adulation, and then the cocaine, and then not having the bankruptcy, the whole fall from grace, effectively, in a sense. Many people would never ever recover from that. So what would you say it is that got you through?
Well, the program definitely, no doubt about it. The program of recovery, because I was gone, mate. I just thought I'm never going to get any better. Um, and then once I got clean, I mean, it wasn't easy, and it took a long time. Took a long time before I was ready to do, to really work on music again. Um, but yeah, I'm blessed.
I want to ask you some political stuff. I don't know if you're up for that. You talk about politics a bit in your book. I've looked at the about you talk about the Irish struggle and
Yeah.
also you
Very
mentioned
close
that
to my heart.
the situation in Palestine has opened my eyes to the fact that there's a lot of corruption in world geopolitics, and that we're seeing the creation of a state in Israel that's taking over a lot of land from Palestine, and they're using religion as well as a cover for that. Now, in your book, when you say in there about Ireland, it seems similar that the Catholic Protestant division was used as cover for a kind of land grab. Uh, what 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 do you think about the situation in Palestine? Do you think it relates at all to Ireland?
Well, the situation in Ireland was that um, the British arrived 800 years ago and tried to dominate, and to some extent did, but there was always rebellions, um, periodic, sporadic rebellion. And the most rebellious part was the North. The most rebellious people, rebellious of the Irish, but were those in the North.
Right.
Yeah. So what they did about 400 years ago, they brought over loads of Protestants from Scotland and the north of England, but mainly Scotland, and just said to them, basically, all you got to do is keep these rowdy Catholics in line, and you'd have the best of everything. And this is my understanding. I'm not an expert, but this is my understanding of what happened. This they did with relish, um, and you know that Ireland fought Britain. The 1916 uprising, and then
Mm.
uh, the Free State of Ireland, which was a compromise. It was still they still needed to swear allegiance to the crown, which a lot of them didn't want to do, but they got that because of fighting the British. Um, the British conceded that, and Michael Collins went over to England, and that was the deal that he got. It was the best deal he could get. But we're going to write a history lesson here, isn't it? But anyway, he then he took that deal back to Ireland, and they were very divided over it. And there was a civil war in Ireland, and then I think it was 1921 or 23. And then what happened was the ones who wanted to take the deal were actually being helped by the British. That British were giving them weapons to fight the rebels. And it was awful. It was awful. And anyway, part of that deal was that Britain would keep the six counties. Um, it should have been, I mean, if they wanted to do all of Ulster, that would be nine counties because Ulster is actually 9 counties, but then there would have been a Catholic majority and they wouldn't have been able to hold on to it. So it was only 6. Um, and it was a Protestant state for a Protestant people. So, um, Catholics had no rights. In fact, a lot of people in Britain don't even know this, but until 1973, a lot of Catholics didn't even have the vote.
Wow.
Yeah, they weren't even allowed to vote. But if you owned a big house, it might get 5 votes. Derry was a largely Catholic city, but they had no representation. It was all gerrymandered, and Catholics, very few Catholics owned their own homes, so they didn't have votes. And when they were inspired by the civil rights movement in America in the 60s, and they started to march 67, 68. And one of the things was one man, one vote. That was what the placards they would carry. Because as I said, some Protestants had more than one. And when we say Protestants, Britain spun it that it was about religion. It wasn't. It was Protestants largely, but mostly would be loyalists. But not all of them. There was definitely some progressive Protestants who were on the side of the
Right.
Catholics, nationalists,
Right.
Republicans, who wanted Irish unity. But at that time, they just wanted civil rights. That's all they wanted. It was a civil rights movement. But what happened is the Royal Ulster Constabulary, which was well over 90% Protestant and loyalist, and they were armed, um, would lead the marchers into a gang of loyalists. Some of them were off-duty policemen, and they just beat the shit out of them.
Right.
And that's what happened. Yeah, and that's what happened. And the thing is this, I learned recently that there was no real IRA at that point. There was no real IRA. All they wanted was civil rights. I mean, there was an IRA, but they were mainly um, academic. They were just, theorizing about socialism and, they weren't kind of on the ground. There wasn't any, that's why the provisional sprung up later. But what happened was the government were going to give the Catholics civil rights, equality. Um, and the loyalists knew that. So Paisley's crew started setting off bombs and blamed the IRA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They, they
It,
they started the violence. That last bout of the Troubles started by the loyalists pretending to be IRA. There was no real IRA. And then the troops came in. And I mean, there was Catholics being burned out of their homes. It was a pogrom. The troops came in, but really, it became clear very quickly that they were just there to uphold the status quo. So, um, and that's what happened. And finally, with the Good Friday Agreement, they got equality.
so, I mean, it sounds very similar to what's happening with the colonial settler state in Palestine, and a lot of this kind of false narratives and you know gaslighting about motives and what's going on. If you say that the loyalists were setting off bombs themselves, I mean that sounds like a kind of sly trick that I think the Israelis would do. What do you think about what's happening in Palestine? Because it has opened my eyes to the corruption of world leaders and everything, and just to maintain this kind of place in the Middle East that the US can work from.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. I think that's exactly it that the US can work from, and the UK really. Um, I think the West are really behind it. They're really behind it because otherwise Israel wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want it there to try and control the Middle East. And I think that, listen, I'm not in favor of any violence. uh, you know, whether that be October the 7th, which was horrible, but it didn't start on October the 7th. There was a lot of horrible things happened way before that. And it's opened my eyes to it as well. I didn't know. I still don't know. I'm not an expert. But I think in the same way that, the loyalists in Ireland were given this power and they were completely out of control. They were completely out of control. They were just, I mean, they viewed Catholics like they were subhuman. And
Mm.
they didn't want them to have any rights, you know. And it seems the same way with,
Yeah.
the Israeli government and the IDF.
It is a difficult thing for many people to speak about, especially performers and artists. There is a lot of fear about speaking on it. I myself have been restricted on YouTube and things like that.
Um,
Is that? I mean, I just from reading your book. That there seemed to be this sort of terrorism charge about Ireland going on in the 90s that you were sort of intimidated by it. You kind of describe it in there that you were heckled by people who used to like Dexys because you were attending supportive, marches about troops out and stuff.
oh
What
yeah,
what? It's the same situation, isn't it? Where terrorism now, I mean, we're seeing pensioners being locked up for holding
yeah,
up a sign.
yeah.
Terrorism has now sort of been misused in the same way as then. Do you see a similarity there? Is that why I mean, people can talk about Ireland now, but at that time, it was impossible, wasn't it, for you to
It
say
was a no-no. It was a no-no. People did not want to hear about Ireland. They did not want to hear about it. Even people on the left, a lot of them, they were prejudiced against Ireland. I mean, that was a socialist revolution going on right there in a part of the United Kingdom. And a lot of socialists here, a lot of people, it's very frustrating on the left. Some did see it, but a lot didn't. You know, um, as regards to speaking out now about what's happening, I absolutely have to. I have to. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Look, even if whatever Anya said, make the tiniest bit of difference, even if it made no difference, I still have to speak out because um, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And if we don't do everything we can to stop the suffering, to stop the slaughter that's going on over there, our own humanity is dead. Do you know what I mean? How do we live with ourselves? We can't. While those people are suffering. If we don't speak up, we're too scared or whatever. We have to speak up. I have to speak up. That's why I love Kneecap.